Hey everyone, Alana here from the Wilderness Torah team. Want to introduce myself and welcome you all to the virtual village. We are truly looking towards the natural world and asking, what can this time teach us? As a part of awakening the earth-based traditions of Judaism, Wilderness Torah creates village life during our immersive land-based festivals by uplifting and encouraging the individual gifts of the collective community. 4 times a week in this virtual village space, you will learn with Wilderness Torah community members such as Danielle, who are sharing their gifts, as long as longtime stakeholders in the earth-based Jewish movement. Would love to see a raise of hands for folks that this is your first virtual village. Woo, welcome. And anyone that this is your first Wilderness Tour program. Great. Y'all have been here before. Cool. We are committed to keeping the virtual village accessible and free. If you would like to support Wilderness Tour in this effort, we welcome any and all donations, big or small, as we endeavor to provide Jewish wisdom and community building through this challenging time. If you are new to Wilderness Torah and want to learn more about us and how to get involved, my peer Malka is going to share a couple links in the chat. One is to our virtual village, another is the donation page, as well as giving us some feedback. We want to know how we're doing and how else we can support you. This session is being recorded and live streamed to Facebook. All of our past sessions are up on our website, so feel free to go check those out, as well as seeing them live streamed on our Wilderness Torah virtual village group. And without further ado, super excited to welcome in Danielle. Danielle is a detective of his own ancestral story, has made pilgrimage to his ancestral homelands, and now helps others uncover their ancestral tale. And we're very excited to learn with you today.
Great. Thank you, Ilana. I'm super excited to be here. Just going to switch to gallery view to see who's in the room. Greetings, everyone. Good to see some friendly faces here. faces of friends, faces of others I've been in previous virtual villages with, learning with. So grateful to be here with you all. And really grateful to the Wilderness Torah team, I want to say, for everything y'all are doing to create this space to bring us together in these times and engage in these, really important conversations. Really particularly grateful for the conversation we had last week on Wednesday on dismantling white supremacy. Still digesting that one, and I want to say in acknowledgement of these times, while the subject of genealogy, however, tangential and unrelated it seems, my prayer for this session is, may this session and may our remembering and reclaiming our ancestral stories be in service to growing our capacity to show up for the important work of dismantling white supremacy. So, once again, my name is Danielle, and I want to say I'm not a certified professional genealogist, but I have been deeply diving into ancestral detective work for the past several years, about 6 years, tracking my own ancestral story, and helping friends to do the same. And it eventually led me to spend 2 years on a pilgrimage through my ancestral homelands, really diving into and connecting deeply with that story, putting my feet on the soil that my ancestors walked upon. And then this past fall, I actually went back with a group of friends who felt the same call to connect with their ancestral lands. We share similar recent ancestral homelands in Eastern Europe. So I accompanied them and in particular supported 2 dear friends, basically as their ancestral pilgrimage guide, helping them to find and to navigate their way through and pay homage to their ancestral shtetls. So often when people hear about this, or in conversation, it comes up that I did this, more often than not, the question that inevitably comes up is why? Like, what motivated me? What moved me to dive so deeply into this journey and to spend 2 years of my life walking through the lands of my ancestors? So I feel like that may be a good place to start. So I'm going to start with a little story, and then we're going to make our way towards getting into the actual nuts and bolts of genealogy. But so I'll start with a story of how I got there. So I grew up in a family of Soviet Jewish refugees. My family came to this country 3 years before I was born. And like most Soviet Jewish families, they were pretty disconnected from Jewish tradition because of the persecution and repression that they faced in the Soviet Union and the outlaw of religion. So I grew up without much of a Jewish background. And fast forward to 2013, I moved out to the Bay Area, the ancestral land of the Ohlone peoples. By the way, I'm meant to say I'm typically based in the Bay Area, but right now I'm talking to you from my hometown of Cincinnati. This is where my parents came to when they came to this country. This is the ancestral lands of the Shawnee and the Miami peoples. So 2013, I moved out to the Bay Area, and having just severely been burnt out from a brief career in climate justice organizing, I was just looking to get my hands in the soil, get my hands in the dirt. I just wanted to find a farm and get some farming experience. So I started applying to all these different farming apprenticeships around the area. And the one that I got into was a farming, they call it a fellowship at a Jewish community farm in Berkeley that many of you probably know, Urban Adama. So I got into the farming fellowship at Urban Adama. It's a fully immersive living, learning, working program. And I gotta admit that I was approaching it a bit apprehensively because, you know, I had some fears, some nervousness. Definitely had some fears of not being Jewish enough going into it. Nervous about, you know, I didn't know what I was getting myself into exactly, and I was nervous about being indoctrinated into something that I didn't want to be indoctrinated into. So I was kind of approaching it as like I was willing to swallow whatever Jewish pill they wanted to feed me in order to get the farming experience. And I was loving the farming. I was really appreciating the connection with social justice and food justice. And I was also beginning to have my mind blown by the way they were engaging with Jewish tradition and connecting it with the agricultural cycles and the cycles of nature. And so you could say I was beginning to have my Jewish awakening there. But the most profound moment for me happened one morning. So we would get up, all of us fellows, we lived together, and we would do a morning practice together every day. It often involved chanting, meditation, prayer, singing, and different staff would come and lead it and bring their own ways of leading it, bring different things to lead it with. And one morning, one of the staff came and brought these old Hasidic nigunim from Eastern Europe. And before this, I'd never even heard the word nigun, which means wordless melody. I came to learn that it means wordless melody. Before this, I'd never even heard the word nigun. I'd never been in any Hasidic spaces. I never heard a nigun in my life before this. And so I didn't know any of these nigunim that he was bringing. And he starts to sing the first nigun, and I don't know it, but yet somehow I know it. Something in me knows this nigun. Something in me is somehow remembering this tune. And this remembering felt like home and belonging. And my eye, as I'm singing this nigun, my eyes are filling with tears, and I'm filled with simultaneously joy and grief. Joy, it feels like reunion with something that I didn't even know I was longing for. And grief at how deeply what I was being reunited with was cut. And I like to joke that Urban Adama ended up becoming my gateway drug to wilderness Torah. And through this community and the ritual that we engaged in, I touched even deeper layers of that ancestral memory that was coming online. And so I was understanding, you know, not just conceptually, but now somatically, understanding that I was carrying memories and stories in my body that were older than me. And I had to know where these stories came from. Who were the people that these stories are about? What are these stories that I feel in my body? What are the stories? The stories that I'm made of. And so thus began my journey into tracking my ancestral stories, finding out who my ancestors were, where they came from, and what these stories were, what these stories are that I'm made of. So I want to pause here, and in a moment, we're going to go out into breakout groups. I want to invite you to go into breakout groups. We'll do paired shares. And the invitation is to share. You'll have 2 minutes each. The invitation is to share what's bringing you here today. What's bringing you here? If you're already on this journey of recovering your ancestral stories, what brought you to it? Or if you're inclined to go on that journey, what's motivating you? What's moving you to go on that journey? And so before we hop into breakout rooms, I just want to share, I'm going to read off this other computer here. I want to share a quote with you all from author, artist, poet, and scholar Stephen Jenkinson from his book, Die Wise. The neglected and abandoned and forgotten dead of that place, who have kin scattered all across the Americas and in every land with a recent history of empire and conquest, in a language the living of that place do not seem to know, were pleading for presence, for some kind of standing among the living, to be remembered beyond the living memory of the kind grieving daughters have of their fathers. The dead there, as the dead do everywhere they are left behind, longed to be claimed by their heirs, by the people hurrying to work and looking to forgive themselves, to be carried for a while by the living, not to be gone, not to be lost. So with that, we'll head out into paired share breakout rooms, and we'll see you back here. So you'll have 2 minutes each. We'll see you back here in 4 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. So I hope you had some good conversations, good shares in your breakout groups. I'd love to invite, if anyone has something that they would like to share with the rest of the group, to throw it in the chat, so that it can be shared and witnessed with the rest of the group, whatever came up in your shares, in your breakout groups, whatever is bringing you here. I'd love to know what's bringing you all here, what's moving you to track your ancestral stories, if you're on that journey. So please, inviting you to put that in the chat, share with the rest of us, whoever feels moved. And so next we're going to go into the nuts and bolts of genealogy. It is my intention we got one answer, Mizrahi Jewish ancestors harder to track. Yeah. For those also invigorated around healing Jewish intergenerational trauma, 2 wonderful resources. Yes, thank you. Beautiful. I'm also going to talk about additional resources in our community later on, name a few additional resources. Yeah. And I do see, this talk is not specifically on healing intergenerational trauma, but for me, genealogy and recovering my ancestral stories and learning about my ancestors and claiming them, to me, it's a part of the path of the work of ancestral healing, of healing intergenerational trauma. So it's all connected. So with the rest of the time, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of it. And genealogy is a huge topic. You can spend years studying this, and we only have like half an hour left, a little more than that. And so we're only going to scratch the surface. And I'm assuming there's a breadth of experience in the room here. Maybe some of you have already been doing this for years, and maybe some of you are just beginning or have not begun yet but want to. So I'm gonna be catering to the beginner here, because my intention is that if you are just at the beginning, that you leave here with some direction, feeling like you have some resources, some tools under your belt now to go and begin doing this work. And if you've been doing it for years, I invite you to come, both with the beginner's mind and see if maybe there's something new you can learn, and also to share your wisdom, your knowledge and wisdom. If you have this experience, please, I invite you to share your knowledge and wisdom. If something comes up to you that feels like it's pertinent to share, please put it in the chat. All right. So with that, I'm gonna bring up some slides here. Oops. Okay, are you all seeing that? Great.
If you could make it a little full screen, that would be great, but otherwise.
Yep.
Good.
Is that full screen now? Great. All right, so diving into becoming ancestral detectives. Where do we begin? Does anyone want to venture where, especially those who maybe are at the beginning or have not begun yet, where you would begin? And you can either throw it in the chat. Living family, yes. Exactly, living family. So it may seem obvious, like the obvious place to start, and I go to it because I can't tell you how many times I've heard from folks who get excited to begin tracking their ancestral story, and they go straight to a website like ancestry.com and start spending time and energy searching for records before they've even gone to their family members to find out what their family already knows, because there's probably a lot of knowledge out there in your family. And my experience is that family members don't necessarily volunteer that information until they're asked for it. So yes, beginning with family, and I would even say to begin with your elders. If you have the blessing of still having elders around, go to your elders to get the stories. Go to them while you can. And I'll add that with elders, it's in my experience, what I saw was that it's a gift that you're giving to the elders in your family when you go to them, whether that's if you have grandparents still alive, or great aunts, great uncles, aunts, uncles. Unfortunately, my grandparents were already gone by the time I got interested in this. But luckily, my older aunts and uncles, they had caught a lot of these stories that my grandparents had. So, go to your family, go to your relatives, and begin with the elders is my suggestion. And going back to the, it's a gift that you're giving them. What I saw when I went to my elders to ask for the stories, who were our ancestors? Where did they come from? What were their stories? It was like my elders lit up. They lit up there was a light in their eyes I hadn't seen before. They were so happy to be asked to give over these stories. And it was like, it occurred to me that maybe they weren't even conscious of this longing, but it was like they were fulfilling some mission as an elder to hand over these stories so that they weren't lost. So it's a gift. And, be ready for whatever stories are going to come out. Our family histories are filled with both joy and pain. And all of those stories may come out. So, be ready for that, and be ready to hold space for your elders telling those stories. And it can be as simple, it's as simple as just listening and receiving the stories. And, I know some may have concern about, elders going into those painful stories. And I want to say, it's okay if they go there. And that actually is also a gift for you to listen to those stories. There are studies that have shown that overall the Holocaust survivors who tended to live the longest are the ones who told their stories. So there's something that happens when we tell stories. It's one way of processing. So go to the elders. And if you've gone to your elders, if you've gone to your family already, go again, ask again. Because memory, as I'm sure all of you have probably noticed within yourselves, memory is an interesting thing. And one day certain file cabinets are accessible, and another day other file cabinets become accessible that weren't accessible before. right? And who knows what it is that makes these file cabinets accessible or not accessible at different times. But I found that it can be just even coming with new questions, coming from different angles with the same questions, can evoke different memories, right? And later on, I'm going to post a link to a super helpful resource that's online where you can, it's like a list of example questions that you can go to your family with. So I'll post that in the chat later. So also going through photo albums, huge boon right there when you're getting these stories. Photos hold so many stories. Just one photo can hold multiple stories in it. So I encourage you to ask your family, you know, what photos do you have? Let's go through the photo albums. Tell me the stories. Who are these people in this photo? Where was this photo taken? What's the story here? And see what comes out. And ask them if they have diaries, journals of their ancestors, any memorabilia. Those all hold stories in them as well. So next, you've been interviewing your family, you're collecting all this information. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, record these interviews. When you go and you talk with your family members, record it. So you have it at least audio. If you're, you know, savvy with video, by all means, do video recordings. But at least audio, if they're comfortable with that, you know, ask them. I've found that my elders were always comfortable with that. And you can take notes while you're interviewing them, but if you have the recordings, then you don't need to take notes while you're doing it. You can just be present with them, and you can go through the recording and take notes later. So you've got all this, information. You can also start while you're interviewing family, you can start, you know, drawing out like on paper, sketches of your family tree, whatever specific branches that you're honing in on with them. And then my recommendation is, you know, we're blessed to live in this day and age where we have tools that our ancestors didn't have for organizing this information and these stories. So we've got online and offline tools to build family trees. And this is the next step that I would recommend, is going and beginning to build your family tree. So if you're not comfortable with putting it online, great offline software that most genealogists recommend is what's called Family Tree Maker software. So if you just Google Family Tree Maker software, you can find it. It's the first thing that pops up. It's $80 to download, but you can put all the info in there and create a beautiful family tree there. But if you're fine with having your tree online, there are actually advantages to having it online that I want to point out. So I don't actually use the Family Tree Maker software. I have my tree online, and I actually have it. So there are like lots of websites where you could go and build your family tree. These are the three main ones that I want to focus on. And I have my tree actually on all three of these sites. And you don't have to build them from scratch on each site if you want your tree on more than one site. There's this fancy thing called a GEDCOM file. And so what it means is if you build your tree on MyHeritage and you want to put your tree also on Ancestry, you can just download it into this GEDCOM file and then upload it to Ancestry, and boom, it brings your tree up on Ancestry. And it's free to build your family trees online on these websites. Free to do it. You have to pay money to be able to use their online databases, their record searches. So you buy a subscription for that. But just to build the tree, put your family tree up there, all the info, all the stories. And I also want to say family tree is not the only way to organize this information. Like maybe after you have interviewed all your people, you've got a book to write. You know, it could be that. And that's one way of organizing the stories. But the family tree is like, you know, the main, like, tried and true favorite among genealogists for organizing all this information in one place. So what's going to happen, here's one of the places where it gets exciting, is when you start building your family tree on one of these sites, let's say ancestry.com, you start putting your people up, you're going to start getting these notices of potential record matches. And what that means is, so their servers, you know, they're searching constantly. I don't know exactly how the logarithmic formulas work, but essentially, you know, they have access to like millions of records, archival records. And when things start to match up, like, let's say you're putting your great grandmother up on your tree, and things start to match up, like her name, her birth date, her birth location, with a record that's out there somewhere, you're going to get a notice that says, hey, there's a potential record match here. So in order to look at that record to confirm whether that's your person, that you need to buy a subscription for. So, you know, but for instance, why are these records useful? Let's say your great grandmother on one branch, that's as far back as you've been able to go on that branch, and you want to find out who her parents were. And let's say you get a potential birth record match. Obviously, that's a gold mine right there, because the birth record is going to tell you who her parents were. So that's one of the advantages of putting your tree online. And another thing you're going to start getting are what are called, they call them smart matches or family tree matches. And what that means is another place where it gets exciting. If you have, let's say, a long lost cousin out there somewhere, and they're building a tree. Let's say you're building your tree on Ancestry, they are building or have built a family tree on Ancestry, and then all of a sudden, one of your branches of your family tree starts to overlap with one of their branches. Then you're going to get a notice that you have a potential family tree match, and it's essentially a potential long lost relative out there that you can connect with. And potentially they have the information, maybe their branch that starts to overlap goes much deeper than your branch does. Maybe they have that information that you're seeking. So those are the advantages to putting your tree online. Now, for those folks who have Jewish ancestors, one of the best resources out there online for diving into Jewish genealogy is this website right here, jewishgen.org. So there's a lot that I could talk about this website, lots of useful tools, databases. So when you go there, I recommend going through this Get Started tab. There's helpful tutorials on how to, like, explaining what kind of tools this site has, how you can use it. So I'm not going to go into all of that, but one thing that I do want to point you to and bring your attention to, one of the most useful tools that I have found at JewishGen, are these discussion groups. So it's under the research tab and discussion groups. So one of the amazing things about the site is the discussion groups. This is basically, they have thousands of people in these discussion groups who are super passionate about genealogy. They're anywhere from amateur to also professional genealogists on these discussion groups. And there's an overall Jewish Gen discussion group, and I recommend signing up for it. And I found the people who are on these discussion groups are super generous. They're super passionate about genealogy. They're not just looking for information themselves, they're looking to help people. And not everyone, but a lot of them are. Even the professional genealogists are out there just looking to help people in their searches. And so you can sign up for these discussion groups, and when you so you've been gathering all this information from your family, you've been putting the tree online on Ancestry or MyHeritage, and you've gotten pretty far along, and then you're at like the end of a branch and you're trying to find some birth record out there. You can go to this discussion group and you just explain like, hey, I'm looking for the birth record of this great grandmother, and you give all the information that you have about her, and you see if anyone out there has that information. Someone may have it, or they can point you in the direction for how to find it. So super helpful. And then in these research divisions here, another helpful link, these get into more specific research topics, and mostly divided up by geographical regions. They're all volunteer organized, so whoever wants to create a research division about a specific topic, they do that through the Jewish Gen website. And then most of these research divisions have their own discussion groups as well, so on specific topics. So for instance, there is, unfortunately, there is not a ton of groups for Sephardic or Mizrahi genealogy, but there is a Sephardic, call it special interest group here. Just responding to someone mentioned lack of resources for Mizrahi genealogy, and yes, that is a problem. And maybe, I don't know if you've checked out this website, but the Sephardic interest group here actually includes Mizrahi genealogy resources. So I recommend checking that out and seeing if that has what you're looking for. So obviously there's a lot more here. But I want to say at some point in your journey of tracking your ancestors and your ancestral stories, the stories that you are made of, you may, like I'm speaking from experience here and also seeing the experience of friends around me, you may at some point feel a call, feel a pull to actually go and put your feet on these places that your people and their stories come from. And so obviously right now in the time of pandemic, it's not the time to be traveling and to be journeying, but assuming that at some point travel will be a thing again, God willing, my encouragement is if you feel that call to go to the lands that your ancestors were born in and where their bones are laid to rest in and where their stories are from, generations of stories, it's a powerful experience. It's a powerful experience. There's, it's one thing to hear the stories, to read the stories, to see the records. And it is another thing to put your feet on the soil where these stories were from. And I want to encourage you, if you go, to go as a pilgrim. And I distinguish pilgrim from tourist and even traveler. And what I mean by that is make your journey, your ancestral journey, your ancestral pilgrimage, make it a ceremony. Make it a prayer. Bring your offerings, bring yourself and your offerings and your prayers and your song and your tears and your joy to the altars where your ancestors' bones are laid to rest. And I can't promise you what'll happen, but in my experience, you won't come back the same. And my experience is I came back with a much more expanded sense of myself and who I am. So with that, I want to pretty much wrap, and it looks like we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A. So before we do that, just want to say, if you have questions beyond this session, I'm going to put up my email now so that you can get in touch with me, daniel.berchenko@gmail.com. Feel free to get in touch with me. Any questions, any needs of support. And I am offering genealogy research help right now by donation for those, if you're interested in that. I'm offering that, so be in touch about that. And I also want to name that whenever travel does again become a thing, I will also be offering guided ancestral pilgrimages, Jewish ancestral pilgrimages to Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is my area of experience and expertise. So be in touch if that is something you are interested in, and I will keep you in the loop about that. And so let me get out of this. And all right. Okay, looks like we've got a lot in the chat. Beautiful. So I just want to invite folks. I'm going to try to read some of these. Looks like we had some questions in the chat, but also if there's anyone who has a question that they want to ask. Also, before I forget, I want to toss this link. I'm going to toss this link into the chat right now. Send to everyone this link that I mentioned before. So this is actually on the Jewish Gen website. So that link that I just tossed into the chat, super helpful resource that they have on Jewish Gen of those questions that I mentioned. It's like a huge list of questions that you can pull from. I mean, obviously, like, come with whatever questions are really on your heart for when you go to your family, when you go to your elders to get the information. But if you want some additional ideas for ways you can evoke memories, that you can evoke the stories out of them, this list that I just put a link to in the chat, super helpful list for that. So, all right, I guess, can we do Q&A with allowing folks to unmute?
I have a question for you, Danielle.
Yes.
I'm curious if you could speak to like the arc of the journey, because I'd imagine for a period of the time, it's like a deep dive and you're really in the excavation and the archaeology. And clearly it sounds like for you, you've arrived at a point where you have the space to support other people. So, is there a point, I guess it's dependent on each person, but I'm curious about your journey in particular. Was there a moment where you're like, I feel complete or complete enough for now, and I'm available to go back to supporting others or just life moving forward? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll admit it's hard to answer specifically what it was. I mean, so the arc of the journey was I was going backwards through time, right? I was going backwards through time. I went to the specific towns, cities, and shtetls that I knew about. And I started in Odessa. So Odessa is Ukraine. That's where my parents came from. I started out there. Briefly had a trip through Russia before that, but I basically started in Odessa. And I was also actually digging through the archives in Odessa to find out more information, because not all of the information is online yet, especially in Eastern European parts, especially old former Soviet states. they're a ways off from getting that info from the archives digitized. People are working on it, but it's going to be a number of years before that's all online and available. So I actually went into the archives there. I was digging through the archives to find out where were the shtetls that my people came to Odessa from. And then I found those shtetls, and I was going to those shtetls, and I was going as far back, you know, in time in terms of specific people, specific lineages that I knew about. And then from there, once I got as far back as I could, in terms of knowing specific places, then I was going backwards through time in general of the history of. So I'm Ashkenazi. So I was going back through time in the history of Ashkenazi Jews. After I went as far back as I could through my specific lineage, then I was just going back through how did Ashkenazi people end up in Eastern Europe, and going back to the cultural birthplace of Ashkenazi culture in the Rhineland, and then eventually actually went back to Israel and Egypt. And you know, so it was a really deep dive. It was a really deep dive. And at some point, I don't know how to explain it. I just felt, it was like a felt sense, like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. The journey's over. I even had a friend, actually, someone who became a really good friend in Israel, looked at me at one point, and she just like sensed it. She looked at me and she was like, I think you're done. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm done. And then I knew it was time to come back. And I just wanted to say, when I talk about doing ancestral journeys, like, you don't have to do it for 2 years like I did. Like, not everyone, you know, necessarily has the space for that. I don't have a family and kids yet, you know, of my own. So I don't have those responsibilities. So, you know, I was able to be really spacious and just like drop everything and be like, okay, this is what I got to do. But, you know, it could be just 2 weeks that you go through, not necessarily the whole arc, but a piece of the arc, whatever feels the most potent to go through. Does that answer your question? All right. Do we have time for another question? Great. Anyone else?
I'm curious, like, for records from Ukraine, there's a branch of my family that I've been trying to figure out more about, and I hear from a relative who I met over the course of doing this that she did some research years ago, and that the Nazis destroyed the synagogue in the town, and they did for a lot of them, and also the graveyard. But so, might there still be records like from like the state about those people?
So it depends on which town, which city. It varies because, unfortunately, one of the parts of the campaigns of the Nazis was not just the erasure of our people, but the erasure of memory. And where they could, they were destroying not just grave sites, but records as well. So unfortunately, not all of the records exist, but they do exist in some places. The Soviets actually moved some records from archives. So records that were already in state archives, a lot of those got evacuated out when the Soviets were evacuating people, but not all of them. And especially a lot of the records that were in shtetls that had not been transferred over to state archives, unfortunately, a lot of those got lost. So, and it varies depending on the regions and depending on the shtetl, on the city. So, I don't have a definite answer, but it just, it takes searching and finding out and seeing if they have the records or not.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have time for one more? getting a, yeah? Great. One more. Anyone else?
Sure, I can jump in.
Yes.
Danielle, I love that you're doing this. I've known about you doing it for a while, and I think I may have even reached out in the last year as I've been wanting to do a trip like you have. So I emailed you already because I want to do a trip with you, but I just want to hear more about like your thoughts. Do you imagine taking groups of people on trips to Eastern Europe? I mean, I think there's a huge market for it, and many of us would really jump at the opportunity. Just curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah. Essentially the answer is yes. I am envisioning taking groups. I mean, I'm envisioning also providing the opportunity to serve as a guide for individuals, like, or if there are individuals and couples and or families who want to go like to their specific ancestral shtetls, because you can't necessarily take a whole group to everyone's ancestral shtetl, right? So yes, there will be some combination of group journeys, but also guiding individuals to their specific places as an offering for those who are interested.
Great, cool. I'll look forward to talking more with you about that.
Beautiful. I look forward to it as well. Okay, I think that's about it. So, oh, I do want to mention real quick one other thing. You know, I mentioned that I am available as a resource going forward. You know, and especially for support if anything is coming up along your journey, even the hard parts, and you just need some support. Someone who's gone through this before, feel free to reach out. And also in the spirit of Village, I also want to name other resources that we have. I mean, we have so many resources. Everyone in this beautiful community and Village is a resource. And I want to name 3 specific resources additionally in the realm of people connected with our community who are doing ancestral healing work. So I want to mention, first of all, Taya Sher, who also did a teaching, is doing some really powerful Jewish ancestral healing work. Alexander Kugler is guiding folks through ancestral connection practices. And Rebecca Elswit is facilitating family constellation work. And she's also a skilled genealogist herself. So just want to name that there are other resources out there because, again, genealogy, as I said, is one part of the broader work of ancestral healing work. And so want to just name that there are other amazing resources within our community who are engaging in this work and resources along the journey. Yes, and Tirza Firestone, another amazing resource, Rabbi Tirza Firestone. So with that, and if you need help getting in touch with any of those folks, feel free to email me and I can put you in touch with them. With that, I want to say thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'll just provide a couple of closing words and a little bit of Wilderness Torah announcements. My name is Malka with the Wilderness Torah team, and just want to say a big thank you for all being in virtual community together this morning or this afternoon, wherever you're calling in from. Next week's schedule, or sorry, the rest of this week's schedule, because it is Monday today. On Wednesday, we have the Tour of Summer with Rabbi Diane. On Thursday, we'll have learning with Rabbi Zelig, whose class will be up and running again, teaching about the goddess. And on Friday, we have music as meditation with Eliyahu Sills, and we'll also be having a Kabbalat Shabbat later that early evening on Friday of this week. And you can always check out our website, Facebook, newsletter, or Instagram, where we post more updates. And you can always share our Facebook events with anyone across the world right now who can tune in virtually during this unique time we're in together. Up here, Alana just inserted a bunch of links in the chat if you missed them in the beginning of the class. They're to sign up for our newsletter, to donate if you feel called, learning more about us, and giving us any feedback so we can know how to better support you all during this time. Lastly, just a big, big thank you to Danielle. It's a blessing to be in community with you, Wilderness Torah, over the years, and you are a gift and offer so much in teaching and wisdom and connection for the Wilderness Torah community and beyond. And it's just really beautiful to learn with you, and such a really such a cool and yeah, just such a wonderful thing to tap into, and really really special for individuals to be able to heal and connect and learn more about where you come from to better inform how we are in the present, and for future generations. It's such an important piece of the journey. So thank you so much for your teachings today. And if you missed it, perhaps Danielle can just put his email one more time into the chat as we close up, and I'll spotlight him again for any last thank yous. And that'll be it for today. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I just put my email in the chat again. So thank you again, Wilderness Torah team. Thank you so much, everyone who came. Thanks for engaging in this. And I want to leave you all, I want to end with a quote. This is actually from Toko Pa Turner, author and dream worker, from her book called Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home. Slightly edited quote. May all those who are being remembered in your personal journey of belonging feel the great relief of love come alive in your reunion with longing. May their dignity be preserved in our care of one another, and may all life be fortified in our not forgetting. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a beautiful day. Signing off.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.